Read the disclaimer. Doofus. And please contact us through this email address with questions or fan art. Thank you for your support.
You know what one of the greatest things about being on vacation is? I don't have to worry about anything at all. All I have to do is just relax and soak up the sweet summer sunlight. Wait, what the hell is that? Nope, 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 nope. No. Jesus, I ran all the way back here. I'd better get changed.
But the baby's coming around like fucking always have no bounds. Suction cups already shit.
So, 20 years ago, there was a bit of a gap in Transformers media. Beast machines had failed to live up to the success of Beast Wars, and as such, the franchise's future was looking a little uncertain. So, Hasbro just decided to say fuck it, and brought over one of the anime that they made as a sequel to Beast Wars in Japan. Because, fun fact, they actually did produce a few anime in Japan to act as sequels to the Beast Wars dub that they released over there. Though, if you want to hunt down and watch the Japanese sequels to Beast Wars, do not expect the same serious tone as the show that was released in the West. Because unfortunately, Japan decided to bastardize Beast Wars by releasing a dub that was basically on the level of 4Kids with how accurate it was. Fortunately, here in the West, that more comedic tone made it the perfect candidate for a minor reboot of the Transformers franchise. And they've never revisited the series since 2001. I wish I was joking, because some of the designs from R80 2001 really need new toys. A, and B, look awesome. Except for Optimus Prime from that series. That needs no improvement. I need to get that. So, what I'm trying to say is, we shouldn't forget R80 2001 in this year of anniversaries. After all, Beast Wars is celebrating its 25th anniversary, I think. The movie is celebrating its 35th anniversary. And, well, I think it's about time we gave it some love. So please stick around to the end of this video so you can hear a very important and relevant announcement. And salutations, denizens of the internet. I'm Firebite27, and let us commence our analysis of Transformers Robots in Disguise 2001, Nightcruz, Mirage GT, and Scavenger.
When you really think about it, the R80 2001 toy line and the 07 movie toy line really share a lot in common. There were a bunch of original molds based off of characters from their respective piece of media, which were then supplemented by repaints of figures from previous lines, even when those molds really didn't mesh well with the aesthetics of the media they were meant to coincide with. And really, this 3-pack is no exception to that statement, even in vehicle mode. We have two vehicles that theoretically could mesh well with the aesthetics of R80 2001, and then we have one which looks hilariously out of place next to the other two. So let's get this suckfest of a review underway with Nightcruz, the first figure mentioned on the box. Nightcruz's jet mode is loosely based off of the UI 4054 Aurora from Ace Combat 3. A jet plane which is so lame in design that it has irreversibly tainted my opinion of that series, and I will now never play a game from it. I genuinely fail to see the resemblance between these two jet modes outside of maybe the tail fins, and honestly, I think that's for the best. Nightcruz actually looks like a jet, as opposed to a random pile of triangles that were just randomly thrown together into a vague approximation of a jet. However, some of the worst design elements of the Aurora still made it into this vehicle mode. Those being the short and stubby wings that don't look like they'd provide any lift and are just there for aesthetic purposes. Don't get me wrong, this is far from the worst plane that I've ever seen on a Transformers figure, but it's also far from the best. Now then, like every figure released around this time, including her own packmates, Nightcruz features a gimmick. Her gimmicks are centered around this blue Google Maps indicator with a bright red pimple in the middle and a bunch of really infuriating paint chipping. What you're gonna want to do is basically take the figure and push your thumb down on the map indicator, and then bam, the front splits open and 2 missiles fly out. Now, I rather enjoy this gimmick, mostly because both mechanisms being activated by a single action is super satisfying to me. Not to mention that I enjoy it, much like the great Patriot Prime once said,
just because launching missiles is fun.
Do keep in mind that once we hit robot mode, these gimmicks will lead to a few of my grievances with the figure overall, but for now, I really enjoy their presence. And speaking of my grievances with the jet mode, let's get into my problems with it. First off, this blue paint chips way too easily. Obviously, it's not an issue that's unique to this figure, but considering its age, I expected something a bit more durable. And speaking of durability issues, we have the clear plastic hinges that are used for this claw gimmick on the front. Now, I've stated that I like this gimmick. However, I'm scared for the longevity of these hinges because, well, they're spring-loaded, and I'm not sure that clear plastic can really handle the stress of spring-loaded mechanisms over time. Not to mention, there's this series of bizarre nubs, which I think are supposed to be its landing gear, though I can't be sure. Mostly because they're so small and look so accidental. And mind you, these lumps are meant to keep the figure up off the ground so you don't scratch this clear plastic chest plate. And my final complaint, what the hell is this paint wash? Because it honestly looks as though the figure has been smothered in bird feces. Now, y'all know me. I really like Siege-esque battle damage, but this does not work. It feels like someone just happened to dunk the entire figure in gray paint and then wipe away everything that wasn't inside the panel lines. I mean, I am glad that there's panel lining to begin with because it actually highlights most of the Siege-esque details, but by that same token, there are some bits where it feels a little messy. But no amount of flaws can really change how I feel about this jet mode. And that is, man, Nightcruz, you are too adorable for me to hate. However, this is only a compliment that I can attribute to its small size. In other words, here's Nightcruz's jet mode next to Kingdom Eraser, Kingdom Cyclonus, R.A.D. 2001 Galvatron in jet mode, a standard Qtama, a standard can of sparkling water, and Fraudside. So overall, I find that Nightcruz's jet mode is small but effective. It's much better than its source material, and I just genuinely like it. It's cute, it's well designed, that's really the beginning and end of it. So let's move on to Mirage GT, who, in my opinion, has the best vehicle mode out of the 3 figures in this set. Now, as I stated in my Off-Road Bumblebee and my Universe Rat-Bat reviews, I like vehicles on the extreme ends of the realism spectrum in Transformers. Either they're super realistic and I like how much they feel like a part of the real world, or they're completely unrealistic and I like them because they're just a cool design. And I feel as though Mirage GT is simultaneously both. By which I mean, it feels like a hybrid of an Earth Formula 1 race car and a Cybertronian car. Or at least more so than the Siege version. Let me put it this way, everything between the surface that the car is sitting on and the bottom of the spoiler is the part that feels realistic and grounded, while everything above that line is the bit that feels just designed for the sake of looking cool. What I think genuinely helps sell the realism of this figure is the deco. The deco on the vehicle mode is amazing. Especially these stripes here at the back. They really help to sell the idea that this is a real Formula 1 race car. What is not realistic, however, is the fact that you can give this car mode a giant head. Now, heads on vehicle modes was a common gimmick in Beast machines. However, this is one of the very few Basics class Vehicons that actually had it. Mind you, the missiles that are molded into the spoiler are equally unrealistic, but in this case, they aren't as blatant with how unrealistic they are. Fortunately, if for some godforsaken reason you want to make it far more blatant in how unrealistic it is, you can just plug in some missiles onto the side, and what the hell are these supposed to be now? The molding on the missiles even seems contradictory, with the front being molded like, I guess, those pipes on vintage race cars that lead off from the engine, while the backs are clearly molded to look like tailpipes. And honestly, I don't even like pressure launch missiles like this. Yeah, pressure launch missiles aren't really a problem for me, it's just they aren't very easy to direct. This was just a lucky shot that I got after 3 tries. Now, these two gimmicks will lead to some additional stupidity both in robot mode and in a particular fan mode, but for now, they're just harmless fun. Heck, the figure even boasts some semi-unintentional gimmick compatibility with the 3mm clip system, specifically here on the spoiler. Of course, the connection is a bit too loose to be intentional, but at the same time, there's also a clip that's far more intentional. And that somewhat more intentional compatibility is the 3mm peg on the gun. Though, quite frankly, that just looks stupid. But the front certainly does not, especially with all of this gray and red paint on it, and the Autobot badge front and center. The gray stripes at the front are a nice touch, especially since you know that Hasbro wouldn't paint them these days. So aside from a few foibles here and there, I think that Mirage GT has the best alt mode out of this set. And that's really all I have to say about him, so here's the size comparisons. Here's Mirage GT next to Kingdom Air Razor, Classics Mirage, RID 2001 Galvatron in car mode, a standard Qtama, a standard can of sparkling water, and Fraudside. So, before we move on to the genuinely awful fan combiner mode and the robot modes, we've got one more figure to talk about, Scavenger. And in vehicle mode, Scavenger has turned into, okay, who the hell commissioned Toei to make a season of Super Sentai based off of Mike Mulligan and his steam shovel? Because that is literally the only reason that my dumbass brain could think of to justify this design's existence. And I don't feel as though the Tokusatsu comparison is unfounded either, as it does look like this thing would regularly go up against giant monsters before turning into a robot to destroy said monster. Not to mention, Toei already made something along these lines in Mashin Sentai Cure Major and Tokyuger, so it's not like there isn't a precedent that's already been set for these kinds of robots. Not to mention, it also engages in its own combination with another member of the team, but we'll save that for later. Sadly, to this day, there's no definitive answer as to what this vehicle mode is, and unfortunately, the closest we ever get to an answer is the back of the Beast Machines box, which says that this is a quote-unquote destruction vehicle, which is an answer that explains simultaneously everything about this vehicle and absolutely nothing at all. It explains everything about what it does, but it doesn't explain a damn thing about what it is. And as I stated earlier, the best explanation that I could come up with for what the hell this was a Zord. Or an android Apatosaurus. And if you're bizarrely committed to having this Viacon eat his leafy greens, fortunately, this figure comes with chomping action. All you need to do is pull on this piston on the back of his neck thingy and bam, the jaw comes springing up. Fortunately, the bottom jaw isn't spring-loaded, so you can pull it down to keep his mouth open. Though, when you leave it open like that, it just makes him look as though he's heard an offensive joke. So, it's likely that he's watching Jobby for the first time. And while we're here, I feel the need to commend the designers for this bit right here in the bottom jaw. the paint in these two divots. Any modern Hasbro toy would have skipped them, so seeing this unnecessary attention to detail kind of astounds me. But that does bring me to one of the strong points of this vehicle mode, the fact that it is very well articulated. So sit back, relax, and let's get into it. Maya, that's your cue.
I'm sorry. Some freak shot me with an arrow while you were on vacation, and now I'm starting to feel funny.
Jeez, was the audience response that bad? Well, I'm glad we stopped making them then.
I'm not going to say that all of the negative feedback we got was your fault, but I think your failure to credit that toy guy for inspiring the videos made it worse.
Yeah, I'll acknowledge that that bit was a goof up on my end, but still, I feel like there's a genuine difference between negative feedback and shooting someone in the chest with an arrow. Anyways, that's not the point. Can you please do the articulation segments?
Sure. Scavenger possesses a ball joint at the base of his neck, a hinge joint with a faux ratchet, a normal hinge joint, a hinged jaw, and hinged front treads that allow for a degree of staring.
So while I do think that Scavenger's vehicle mode is weird, I do still enjoy it. However, because of its messiness, I can't say that it's my favorite of the set. Now, I want to make it obvious that I don't hate any of the vehicle modes in this pack, but I do think that there are some that are vast improvements over others. Of course, some people might try and argue that this barely even counts as an alternate mode, but if Clobber, Tankor, and RC all have alternate modes, then calling this a vehicle isn't that much of a stretch either. Though I will say that this vehicle mode is a bit of a literal stretch, as it's the tallest vehicle mode in the set. In other words, here's a Scavenger next to Airazor, Grapple, Tankor, RID 2001 Galvatron in Mammoth mode, okay, whatever, Kingdom Megatron, Ironworks, a standard Futama, a standard can of sparkling water, and Fraudside. So overall, I find Scavenger's vehicle mode to be messy, but charming. It's a silly idea with a silly execution and a silly gimmick, and I love it for that. And with that, we are, approaching the 20-minute mark, and we're done with the vehicle modes. But before I move on to the robot modes, I have to mention a particular fan combination that was created a while ago. Overkill. And my thoughts on it are, I'm not getting the time I used to combine these back, am I? Literally every other T-Rex mode I've ever seen on any other figure looks a lot better than this. In fact, I'm not even going to give it its own articulation or size comparison segments. That's how little I care about it. It's ugly, it fails to stand up, it's poorly articulated, and the worst of all, it fails to stay together. In other words, it's utterly useless. Hell, I even tried to make something better with zero passion or creativity or motivation, and yeah, it turned out about as well as you think. So, we're moving on from this fan combination nonsense, and on to the robot mode. Nightcruz. Transform. Nightcruz's robot mode is endearing, to say the least. Her arms are enormous. And I mean that both figuratively, as they are her weapons, and literally, as they are literally her arms. The gray bits here down by the bottom of each weapon are meant to be her actual hands, at least according to the Beast Machines comic that showed Spy Streak. And everything about these arms is just wrong, and the reason they're so wrong is because they had to shoehorn in those gimmicks that I mentioned in vehicle mode. Which, yes, were fun, but they're so big that they kind of limit the articulation. A problem that is only made worse by the fact that her feet are pretty small. Combine her relatively small feet with this top-heavy design, and as I'm sure you can imagine, she does not stand up very easily. And sadly, shoddy kibble management is not the only issue with this figure, as if you look at the head, you will see that it is covered in hideous paint chipping. Fortunately, the light piping on the head will distract you from this fact. as well as the light piping on the rest of the body. For some monumentally incomprehensible reason, the majority of Nightcruz's black plastic is actually a really dark, smoke gray, translucent plastic. I honestly have no idea why this was the case, but frankly, it doesn't irk me as much here as it does in other cases because, honestly, this stuff doesn't really read as translucent plastic. And hey, not everything about this figure is god-awful. The head, for one, is marvelous, as it really looks like a fusion of Hunt for the Decepticons Pterodive and a Seeker, with maybe the same kibble management sensibilities as Allspark Power Overcast. And if I can be genuinely frank with you all, I really like how brazen the kibble management is on this figure, because it's just so funny to me. It's like, yeah, I'm a plane, so what? How could you tell? And in any case, even in spite of the fact that her kibble management does result in her being top-heavy and falling over a lot, I still think that she has some pretty acceptable articulation.
Nightcruz's head is on a rotation, with shoulders that hinge up and down, and rotate. Her elbows are on a ball joint, allowing for bicep rotation and elbow bends. Her hips are ball jointed, allowing universal movement. Ball jointed knee allows the leg to rotate and bend from the knee, and her ankles are on hinges.
So with that out of the way, let's talk about how big she is, because, well, surprisingly, Basics class figures are now kind of the size as some modern deluxes. Here's Nightcruz next to Kingdom Airraiser, Kingdom Megatron, Hunt for the Decepticons Pterodive, Kingdom Cyclonus, a standard Kutama, a standard can of sparkling water, and Fraudside. So overall, I do like Nightcruz's robot mode, but it's just so awkward. There have been so many bots in the past with asymmetrical designs like this, and honestly, I can't say that Nightcruz's is one of the good ones. Beast Wars Megatron? That's an alright design with an asymmetrical arm design. I struggle with my desire to recommend this to you because, well, it's not really great. But if mediocrity is what you want, no baby, have I got the bot for you. Mirage GT, Transform. At first glance, Mirage GT has an alright looking robot mode, but look at him any closer than this and you will instantly realize just how quickly he falls apart. First of all, for all the tiny paint flourishes that they gave him in vehicle mode, the robot mode gets these disappointingly unbroken blocks of yellow and red paint. Likewise, the silhouette of the robot mode looks alright until you realize that what's bulking out said silhouette is a backpack, and moving it out of the way exposes just how thin and lame the robot mode really is. And making matters worse, it exposes just how much of the robot is made out of translucent plastic. Now, of course, many people may wonder why reviewers such as myself, Dr. Lockdown, the Stop Motion Reviewer, and TJ Omega hate translucent plastic parts. And the simple reason is, they can be really, really brittle. Literally any socket for a ball joint that's made out of translucent plastic will shatter eventually. And unfortunately, that's what they made Mirage GT's waist swivel out of. Fortunately, the one joint on this figure that bears more stress than this ball joint was not made of clear plastic. However, what it turns into is my least favorite part of this figure: the gun. Now, thanks to my previous reviews, you should know how little parts forming bothers me, at least when it uses the weapon peg itself. However, this particular example is stupid in my opinion. It uses the hinge that connects the gun to the top of the figure's head. And while I don't find it as stupid as your typical garden variety parts forming, it still relies on this stupid thin hinge that I'm afraid will break at some point in the near future. Fortunately though, if you really wanted it to be, the gun is adjustable, so you can go for this DevCon-like look, or have a tower sticking off the back of his head like a ponytail, or even go for the look of a man that was recently banned from using climbing grade suction cups.
I'm Penis Man!
And sadly, that's about the only bit of unhampered separate articulation here, because the rest of it is somewhat restricted by the kibble. The legs get basically no backwards movement thanks to the backpack, the forearm kibble restricts sideways rotation on the arms, and the worst offense is that the knees were placed all the way up here, basically being the final fifth of the leg. And probably the dumbest thing of all about this figure is that you cannot use the missiles as melee weapons. It was kind of a common design trope of the time, and to see them not use it here is just disappointing. And then we have the feet, with this dumb looking pointed elf shoe look, which I hate. Now, you can change this to a more chunky foot if you rotate the foot around, but that leaves them off center enough that I genuinely prefer them the other way around. But that's not even the rock bottom of stupidity with these feet. The bottoms of them are actually painted. Yes, the surface that has the most contact with the ground is covered in paint, which means it could chip. But that is far from the pinnacle of the stupidity that this figure is capable of. If your copy of Mirage GT was improperly assembled, then the legs will be on the opposite sides of where they need to be, preventing this figure from standing up straight. And the only way to fix it is either turning the legs so that the knees bend sideways, or having the waist turned around so that it's backwards and hollow. Or, you know, swap the legs around like I did. Not that it matters anyway, since this figure's articulation is crap. Maya?
In robot mode, Mirage's head is on a ball joint that is on a hinge. His shoulders and elbows are on ball joints, and so are his hips and knees. His waist can rotate, and his ankles have a bunch of hinges on them that allow backward movement.
Now, his articulation isn't great, mostly because his joints are placed in bad places. But the one thing that I will give him, the compliment that is the fact that he has a great head sculpt. It looks like some cyborg Egyptian burial mask. And the one other thing that I will give this figure is that I love the color scheme, even though I don't think that the torso has enough color separation. Okay, so before I close out this section altogether, I have to give this figure one more service despite the fact that I hate it. And that is its size comparison segment. So here's Mirage GT next to Kingdom Air Razor, Allspark Power Overcast, Classics Mirage, a standard Qtama, a standard can of sparkling water, and Broadside. So overall, while I do think that Mirage's robot mode is alright and inoffensive, it just screwed up on some of the most basic things that it could have done right. So now then, without further ado, let's get on to the final part of this review. Scavenger, transform. So in stark contrast to his vehicle mode, I find that Scavenger's robot mode is, well, bizarrely photogenic. The bulky chunkitude of the torso should feel disproportionate when juxtaposed against the somewhat slim and slender arms and legs, but thanks to the pistons on the arms and the treads nailed to the sides of the legs, they don't end up feeling that out of place. The gaps underneath his armpits should really bother me, but instead they don't really seem all that noticeable, especially with the weapons and the cockpit from vehicle mode covering them up. The torso should also look really messy, and the head should look out of place among all this crap that's just shoved up here. But instead of looking stupid, it instead looks really cool like badass torso armor. And dear God, his head should look terrible, but it doesn't, despite the fact that it really looks like a wedge of Parmigiano Reggiano with eyes taped to it. Not bad for a guy with the same number of facial features as Perspective End's logo, and hey, he has light piping, so that's a bonus. Not to mention, his claws actually allow him to hold weapons that the other two can only dream of wielding. And baby, those colors, the luscious powder blue, the black, the lovely white and gold, it all just works together so well. Not to mention, it's actually broken up extremely well when compared to the other two members of his set. It even gives the figure a similar vibe to 07 Longarm. But on this show, looks mean nothing without proper articulation to back them up. And for what it's worth, Scavenger's robot mode delivers a great deal of joints, despite the fact that it's a, well, small-scale figure from the early 2000s.
Scavenger possesses ball-jointed shoulders, double ball-jointed elbows, opening claws, waist swivel, ball-jointed hips, ball-jointed knees, and feet on a hinge.
The articulation is unfortunately where I have my one and only problem with this figure, and that is his disappointing lack of outward shoulder movement. Now, when it comes to my standards for articulation, I prefer that my figure's arms have a 360-degree rotation from the shoulder and at least a 90-degree bend outwards from the shoulder. And heck, the gimmick even works in this mode, and it isn't intrusive in the least, which is kind of a miracle to me. I've never seen a figure before with a gimmick like this that didn't impede on the articulation. It's honestly hilarious for reasons not least of which being the fact that, if you think about it, that might be the size of Scavenger's actual head. In any case, Scavenger is probably the bulkiest of the robots in this set, so let's do our size comparisons before we wrap things up. Here's a Scavenger next to Kingdom Air Razor, Earthrise Grapple, Allspark Power Stockade, a standard Kutama, a standard Camp Sparkling Water, and Broadside. And everyone else just for the fun of it. And in closing, I'd like to say that, well, Scavenger is pretty fun. He's probably the best mold out of this set. And he has the words, "Remake me as a weaponizer" written all over him. And I think that the set as a whole is pretty fun, though it's not without its weak points, unfortunately.
So, overall, I'd say that this set is pretty kick-ass. You get a tiny trifecta of Transformers, which are all fairly decent. However, they aren't must-haves, they're just must-recommends from me. And, to be perfectly honest, a lot of these figures show their age in some pretty horrendous ways. Such as Nightcruz, for example. Yeah, I really do like her on a personal level for her gimmicks, her paint, her alt mode, and I do really find those wonky robot mode arms endearing. But those same wonky robot mode arms make her very tricky to balance. She's got really limited posing when compared to the rest of the members of her team, and I don't know what it is, but something about the paint wash that they chose really doesn't work, so that ultimately bumps her down from being like an 8 out of 10 to being just a 6.5 out of 10. Still, she could have gone far worse, like with Mirage GT, because the only thing I like about this figure is the deco of the vehicle mode and the vehicle mode itself. There's literally nothing else that I like about this figure. The gimmicks are cool, but the thing that holds me back from enjoying it are the paint on the feet and also the use of clear plastic, which is the most egregious out of all of the figures here. Which means that the gem here, oddly enough, is Scavenger, with his really nice, wacky alternate mode and his, well, great posability in robot mode. The unintrusive gimmick, the paint, the chrome, it just comes together to make him one of the best small-scale figures ever made. And overall, I'd say that bumps up this entire set to scoring a 7 out of 10 for me. Because, quite frankly, this set is too good for me not to recommend. Though, I'll wish you the best of luck with getting them on eBay. If nothing else, go and get Scavenger. There are several repaints of this mold out there, and you owe it to yourself to get one. Now then, of course, now that I've reached the end of this video, it's time to discuss the future of RID. I do not want this part of the franchise to be forgotten. In fact, I'd like for these three in particular to get new generations figures, specifically as weaponizers. I think that you can probably see where I'm coming from with Scavenger. I mean, this guy just has weaponizer written all over him. From his shovel mouth to the guns on the side of him to his claws, they could all make for great weapons. Make a deluxe of this, Hasbro. That's your mission. Next up, we also have Mirage GT, who could also make a pretty dope weaponizer with his head gun. And also, his feet could act as like turbine blasters. And then, well, I think I've already explained Nightcruz well enough. Her arms would make for some absolutely delirious claw weapons and missile launchers and whatever you'd like. But overall, I know it's not going to happen because no one seems to remember Robots in Disguise 2001. But I'm not going to let that happen on this channel, because not only am I going to review RID 2001 Galvatron at some point in the near future, but on this very channel, I will be premiering the first episode of an abridged series based on Robots in Disguise 2001. I've been allowed graciously by its creator, Deep W Nut Reviews, to premiere a preview of the series in this very video. So, sit back, relax, grab some popcorn, and let's roll that preview.
Oh, the general public's not going to understand this.
Quiet down, critic.
Wait. Predacons? Don't you mean Decepticons? Yeah, that was wrong against anime antagonist rules.
Yes, I am Megatron, leader of the Predac. Wait, did you just call me a Primus damned GoBots?
Well, mon ami, how about we get closer and listen in? Or better yet, attack him while his guard is down.
Whoa, chaps! I hear there's a spot of honor.
This is Autobot Customer Services. How may I help you?
Welcome to the slaughterhouse, brothers, cause I'm making bacon! Yeah!
Sorry, but I prefer the taint of a red sports car instead.
Quick, Optimus, I need a pickup!
Wait, a simp? I can't be around those!
Hey, Reg, where are my tools? I can't find them.
I really need to get some more music.